I'm going to give everybody a couple of minutes to trickle in and then we'll get started. All right, so for the sake of time, we've got a lot to cover tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and get started as people are logging in. But my name is Kelsey Helsper, and I'm so glad you're here. And I'm excited to talk to you guys today about an expansion on play, creating purposeful teaching opportunities for your child within play. So before we get started, I wanted to talk to you about some of your communication options throughout this webinar. So participation is strongly encouraged because it really helps you relate to the content and apply it to your daily life. So I will be pausing throughout the presentation to give you opportunities to engage about the topic, mostly through polls and different chat options. I've found that the fastest and most convenient way to participate is through using the chat feature, which if you see this visual down here, you can see at the bottom of your toolbar, there should be a button labeled chat. And if you click on that, it should open up the chat feature. Within the chat, you will see that you will have the option to select panelists or to select panelists and attendees. So if you select panelists, then only I will be able to see what you type. But if you select panelists and attendees, then everyone that is in the webinar will be able to see what you've typed. So there's really nothing to that besides your preference. So whatever you feel most comfortable with, anything that you guys share with just me via the chat as well will be kept confidential with your name and your child's name out of it as well. So do whatever makes you feel most comfortable, and please use the chat to ask questions or participate. So we're going to have our first participation right now. I'm going to launch a poll that should pop up on your screen. So once you see it, feel free to answer. So how much experience do you have with ABA? Awesome. So it looks like a lot of you have a pretty good amount of experience. So I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're continuing to learn about what you can do to help your child with their play skills. So just to make sure, will somebody in the chat let me know if they can see my screen advancing as well? Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, and then I have one other poll that I wanted to ask you guys right now. We did a play webinar in April, so I'm just curious if any of you attended that webinar or not. That will kind of help me guide our discussion tonight. All right, so it looks like most of you did not attend the play webinar, so I will go in a little deeper to some of the parts that may be kind of an overview of the last one, but we will be diving in deeper too for those of you who were at the other play webinar to talk about some other things that weren't in that previous webinar. So first, I want to talk about our mission. So we always want to provide support to you, your child, and your whole family. This process is about making daily life easier for you and your child and everyone that is involved in your child's life. We always want to make sure we're using behavior analytic research and science to guide all of our decision-making on what to teach and how we teach it. And while this is important, it can also be intimidating to understand. So that's why we're here, to help break down some of these things that might seem more complex or confusing. And our mission is also to collaborate and make your experience as meaningful as possible. We want all the information that we give you to be helpful and useful. And we want your input and feedback throughout this process as well, because that helps us guide our content for future webinars and future trainings. So, the objectives of this training tonight are to discuss the importance of play skills, to review the different stages of play, to identify ways to enhance your child's play experience, and to learn ways to problem solve during your play interactions with your child. So, if you attended the previous play webinar, this may look familiar, but since it still applies to our topic here, I thought it was worth a reshare. So, this quote says, "Children learn as they play. More importantly, in play, children learn how to learn." And I just love this because it really emphasizes the importance of play and the impact that play can have on all sorts of development. So, let's talk more about why play skills are so important for your child. So, knowing what to expect out of your child's play can really help support your child as they learn to play in different ways and learn to play with siblings, friends, and peers. So, in general, play helps to increase healthy brain development, increase communication and language development, develop and improve social skills, develop physical, cognitive, and emotional strength, and provide an alternative to rigid or repetitive behaviors. So you can see that there are a lot of impacts to putting an emphasis on play. So there are five main roles that you will play in enhancing your child's play interactions. And these include observing, setting up the environment, pairing, teaching, and reinforcing desirable behaviors. So we will reference these five things throughout the presentation a lot as we discuss the different stages of play. So now let's talk a little bit more about what each of these things mean. So your first role is to observe, and this will really help you to identify and understand your child's interests and the way that they like to play. So what items do they gravitate toward? How do they like to play with those items? Do they want you to be involved with their play, or would they rather play alone? Is there any pattern in the way that your child engages with certain items? Or does your child have any aversions in play, such as loud noises or different textures, or even another person interacting with their materials? Being able to answer these questions will help you to understand where to start when it comes to playing with your child. So, this is a really important step. And why we like to put it first is because you can learn a lot about how your child plays and how you can best approach your child within play if you can already answer these things going into that interaction. Another thing you will want to focus on before your play interaction starts is setting up the environment for success. So, this could be minimizing distractions in the environment, such as decluttering the room or maybe turning off electronics. It may also be important to go to an area where there aren't other people around if your child is really seeking attention from a lot of people, or maybe in a more enclosed space if your child likes to run or roam around. You might also need to collect some necessary materials for whatever you're trying to teach your child. So, making sure all of those things are within your reach and available to you can be a really good thing if you're trying to keep your child in that room and focused on that activity. And the setup process will look different depending on your child and depending on what skills you're trying to teach. But if you're aware of how your environment is affecting your child's ability to learn that new skill, then you'll really be able to set your child up for success with learning that new thing. So that leads us to your first role within the actual play interaction, which is pairing with your child. And this means that you will just immerse yourself in your child's play. So, your goal here is to make the activity more fun for your child. So, when starting out, it's really important to follow your child's lead and try to meet them where they are and focus on making your play experience with them positive by easing into your play interaction. So, even if your main goal is to teach them something completely different from the way that they are wanting to play with that item, really try to take a step back and meet them where they are first so that you can build that positive relationship within play. Um, if they can't tolerate you being within a close proximity to them, let's say they're pretty territorial of their play items, or they really just don't like other people involving in their play, that's okay. And we could work on tolerating first. So maybe you move a little further away out of their specific play area, but you're watching them play and you can keep scooting closer and closer. Um, you can also start to try to imitate some of the things that they really like within play. So you could imitate a noise that the toy makes, or you could start pairing your voice with the sounds of that item that they already enjoy. And as you're easing into your child's play, also try to work on making those interactions more enjoyable by getting creative, using silly voices, um, teaching them about the different things that they can do with that item without forcing them to play in a way that they don't want to. So you can kind of just model the different things that they are able to do with that item. And really just try to think of the ways that you can enhance the toys that they're already interested in playing with. The main thing here with pairing is you really want to try to avoid placing any demands while you're focused on pairing so that you're not accidentally making the activity harder or making it less enjoyable for your child. So, really, the main goal again is to enhance the activity and make it more fun for your child. So, just by being involved in it, your child is going to start paying attention to you more because you're showing them new fun ideas and showing them things that they can do that they enjoy. So that should really be the main goal here. Whenever you're focused on pairing, is not necessarily teaching them how to play in new ways, but just showing them all the fun things that they're able to do with that toy that they may not really know that they can do. Um, so you also want to look for signs of yourself getting paired with the activity. And that could include your child smiling at you, laughing, reaching for you. Maybe they're handing you items so that you'll continue doing what you're doing. Or maybe they just keep looking at you and seeing what you're going to do next. So just be on the lookout for those signs about your child getting excited about your play interaction, because that means that you're effectively pairing yourself with that activity. And it'll be easier for you once you jump into teaching them something new. It'll be easier for you to do that because you're already pairing yourself with that activity in a positive way. Okay, so we're going to review a video of one of our Bierman BCBAs focusing on these three things within an interaction with her daughter. So I will pause throughout the video to discuss the different strategies as they happen.
Sure, I'll open this. Yeah.
That's my table.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Squish, squish. Squish, squish.
Don't mash.
Smash, smash.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Play-Doh. Play-Doh.
I want
Play-Doh.
And I'm going to pause it here to talk about the beginning of this video. So in the beginning, you see that this parent has offered a few different activities on the table. The parent did this to really gauge interest and see what her child naturally gravitated toward. She selected the Play-Doh. So what the parent did here is she moved the other items off the table so that they could really just remain focused on this Play-Doh activity, which was a great way to set up the environment for success and make sure that they were focused on the same thing. And as the parent opens the Play-Doh and starts playing, she begins showing her daughter different ways of smashing and squishing the Play-Doh. She's also doing a great job of embedding language into the activity by labeling the different actions and labeling the Play-Doh itself. And just by doing those things and not requiring anything else out of her daughter besides just playing, her daughter was given the opportunity to start imitating the action of smashing the Play-Doh, and she even echoed the word Play-Doh. So had this parent not provided these opportunities, it's likely that the child may not have engaged in those behaviors.
roll, roll, roll.
Make a snowman.
I would love to make a snowman.
So me.
I would love to make a snowman for you.
Me. What make a snowman?
Do you want to build a snowman? 1, 2, and 3.
Make a snowman.
Yay! Here's the car for the snowman. Vroom, 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 vroom. Crash. Oh no!
All right, so when looking for signs of good pairing, you can see that the child keeps looking over at her mom to see what she's going to do next, showing the parent that they are becoming paired with this activity. So, what the parent does here is continues to provide different pairing opportunities. So, they roll the Play Doh into a ball, build a snowman, sing a song about building a snowman, count. Um, they continue to crash with the car and make different sounds. And you can see here that the child is laughing, looking at her mom, wanting her to be engaged and show her these different ways to play. So that's really how you can see that the parent is becoming paired within this activity. So once you feel like you've paired yourself with the activity or item, then it's a really appropriate time to start teaching something new. So first and foremost, you want to start small with your goals. You want to make sure your child's play experience is positive. So if they ever start showing signs of pulling back or not enjoying the activity, then it's time to kind of scale back to pairing or focus more on that before pushing forward. But it's also important to set those small goals so you make sure that the goals are setting your child up for success, that they're achievable to them, and that will help them contact the success and the praise and reinforcement for doing those new skills. If you try to teach something and feel like it is too hard and you get that pushback, like I said, it's okay to shift gears and scale back. It's also okay to say, that may have been a little bit too hard. Let's shift to something else. You just want to focus on keeping that play interaction positive so that you can continue to engage with them and teach them new things. And again, the goal is to keep the interaction as positive as possible. So you can also use prompts to help your child learn a new skill if you think the demand that you've placed is too difficult for them. Some recommended prompts would be to model the behavior that you're wanting them to do yourself so that they have that model and they're able to imitate it. You could also use a gesture to help guide them through an activity, or you could provide some verbal or physical prompts if they seem like they're getting stuck. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, don't forget to reinforce your child's new play behaviors. So you can do this by giving your child lots of positive feedback throughout the activity, such as saying, "Great job pushing the car down the ramp," or "I love how you tried something new." And when you pair with your child, you may discover a fun new way to play with the toy that your child really enjoyed. So that in itself, continuing that activity could be the reinforcement because they're really enjoying it. If they spontaneously start to imitate a new play action you're showing them, then just keep going and give them tons of praise for that. Because not only will you be pairing yourself with the activity more, but you'll also be giving them repeated exposure to that new play behavior and giving them the opportunity to do it again and again. And as a last resort, if you're unable to find something within the play interaction that is reinforcing to your child, if they're not really seeming into the play activity, but they are tolerating you teaching them or playing, you can always try to use some alternative reinforcers, such as different preferred items or maybe a preferred edible item, physical play, such as tickles or squeezes, or even another toy. So you could just shift gears and go back to the toy that they were more interested in. But the main thing is to make sure your child knows that by engaging in these new play behaviors, they get access to the things that they really enjoy. So now let's take another look at an example of how to teach and reinforce within play.
We do have a car, and you have the number 1. Wow, that's the number 1. I'm gonna put a hat on number 1. What color is my hat?
I don't.
Well, that's what color the car is. What color is the hat?
Orange.
Orange. Wow, there's a hat for number 1.
So here, as the child and parent talk about the activity, the parent continues labeling the number 1 and the hat, so building in some of that pairing. The parent then places a demand by asking her child to label the color of the hat. So as you can see, the child did not answer correctly first, but what the parent did really well was she observed that her daughter was actually looking at the item that was in her hand, and she called it yellow. So instead of, trying to correct that response, she just asked the question again and gave her a nice little prompt to that item, and she answered it correctly. And then you can see the reinforcement that the parent gave was saying, orange, wow, and using an excited tone and continuing the activity.
Oh, I have another hat. I could put my hat on this one. What's this? What is it? You want to put on the hat? It's a fish. Can you say fish? Fish. You put it on his tail.
So you can see here too, the second demand that the parent placed was to label the fish. So you can see here that things didn't necessarily go as planned because her daughter was more interested in putting the hat on top of the fish than answering the question. But the parent did a great job of pushing through without being forceful with it. So instead of following through with her child's request right away, she delayed access to following through with getting her child to label the fish by providing that vocal prompt. And then she immediately reinforced by letting her daughter then put the hat on the fish after she answered it correctly.
Oh, wow, so cool. How silly is this? I'm going to put it on the bird. What is it?
Me.
You're going to do it. Okay. Can you say bird?
Bird.
You're right. Here you go. Tweet, 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 tweet. Your bird needs a hat. Here it is. Oh, boy. Oh, it fell down.
Okay.
It fell down. Wow, I like how you did what I did. Oh, dear. It fell down. Go ahead and put it on the bird. I'm going to put my hat on the car. What is this? Car. Vroom, 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 vroom.
So here, the parent continues to work on labeling the different items. So when she holds up the bird, she quickly realizes that she may have placed a demand that's too difficult based on her reaction to the last demand that was placed. So instead of following through with that demand, she made it easier by just having her echo what it was. So she said, say bird, and she said bird. So you can also see that the parent's doing a really good job of continuing to pair throughout this activity. So instead of placing back-to-back demands, the parent is continuing to provide those fun and engaging opportunities as well. And as they continue with this interaction, her daughter spontaneously places the hat on the bird's head, which is just what the parent did previously. And since her daughter had never engaged in that play behavior before, she got really excited. She gave her a lot of praise, and then they continued doing silly activities such as saying, oh dear, as the car was falling down and things like that. So now let's discuss the different stages of play that your child might be engaging in. These stages of play will really help you to identify where your child is in their play and help you to figure out how you can become engaged in their play as well. So the first stage is solitary play. And that just means playing solo without attending to others. And feel free to be referencing this nice little visual here that really does a good job of showing what the play looks like, but we'll also go through more examples of these as well. The next one is onlooker play, which that is playing solo, but watching others in their environment. Parallel play is playing near others or with similar toys, but not necessarily interacting together. Associative play is sharing toys and communicating with others during play, but not necessarily working toward the same goal. And then cooperative play is playing with others while working toward a shared goal. And while pretend play is also a type of play that your child can engage in, we will not be focusing on that within this play webinar. If you would like to learn more about pretend play in particular, though, there will be a webinar solely on that type of play in August, and we can talk about that later too. So I'm going to share a poll here, and I would just like to know, out of all the types of play that I just mentioned, which does your child engage in the most? All right, so it looks like we have a couple of kiddos in solitary play, one in onlooker and one in associative. So we'll talk about all the types of play, as I'm sure, especially for those of you who have children engaging in those earlier stages of play, you're probably wanting your child to be playing in those other types of play as well. So we'll talk about how you can get there and how you can meet your child where they are within their play. Okay, so let's take a deeper look into solitary play. So if your child is engaging in solitary play, that means your child is playing alone without attending to others around them. And this play is all about exploration through their senses. So your child may gravitate toward items that stimulate one or more of their senses. Some examples could include mouthing objects, feeling different textures such as sand or Play-Doh, watching items that light up or have contrasting colors or patterns, or listening for different sounds. So some appropriate play materials for this stage of play include bright colored objects, high contrast patterns, items with different textures, like I mentioned, rice, Play-Doh, kinetic sand, any type of sensory material, toys that make different noises, toys that you are okay with them placing in their mouth, mirrors so that they're able to watch themselves or see the light reflecting, or board books with lots of different pictures. So we're going to watch an example of solitary play. So let's talk about some of the observations that I made within this video. So this girl has a couple of different opportunities to interact with a peer, both in the beginning and end of this video, but she chooses to continue playing by herself. And when the second peer approaches within her view, she looks up, but she doesn't necessarily look to see what he's doing. Instead, she kind of looks past him and continues to just manipulate the item that she has. So that is why I would consider this to be solitary play. But now let's talk about what you could do to enhance this play experience for her. So by observing the video, we see that this girl seems to be more interested in a visual component of this item, since she's putting it close to her face and looking through it. She was also sliding it with her fingers, meaning that she could have something tactile that she is enjoying. So given those two pieces of information, it might be good to just jump in and try to play with this. But if this toy is really preferred for her, she might not really like taking turns with you right at first, especially if she prefers to play alone. So you might want to collect some other materials that share some of those other features that we talked about. So has a visual or textural component to it. And also you can see here, the environment's pretty cluttered around her. So before you would jump in and try to engage with her, it might be important to declutter that environment so she's not bouncing around to different things to try to avoid your interaction. But given that it seems she likes to play alone, she may not enjoy your company right at first, and that's okay. And that may be where some of your kiddos are in their play as well. They may prefer to play alone, and they may not enjoy other people interacting with their items. So really, pairing will be a crucial step whenever you're playing with these kiddos, because you want to make sure that they are learning to enjoy your interactions with them. So your main goal right away for solitary play may just be to pair yourself with different activities and get your child to really tolerate or enjoy you being in their play experience. Really, you won't want to take this item from her. So that's why it would be important to bring in some other items, because taking that from her obviously would have a negative reaction, most likely, to jumping in and playing. So, like I said, just focus on how you can make it the most positive that you can, and just try to ease yourself into it. So, if you get really close and you realize that they don't really seem that interested in that, you can back up and narrate how they're playing, or start bringing in other items and handing them items, and associating yourself with giving them new play items. You could also start to, as you're getting more paired in that activity, start to just kind of label things yourself, that different colors or different things on that toy, or you can try to get her to imitate you within play. But like I said, meet your child where they are with this. It may just be enough to get yourself into their play interaction at first, and then build from there. So the second stage of play is onlooker play, which means that your child is still playing alone, but maybe they're starting to watch others around them and comment on some of the other stuff that their peers are doing. So some examples of this could include watching Big Brother play with cars, watching peers play at a water table. You can see these other examples as well. But since your child is interested in play, in the play of others within this stage, it's important to capitalize on that motivation, and understand what play behaviors they are interested in. So what are they watching the other peer do? Maybe it's the item that they're interested in, or maybe it's the peer playing with that item that seems really fun to them. So this will help you identify ways that you can pair within your child's play. You can watch for what they're looking for, and then you could start to model some of that behavior. And the items that you use for this stage of play can vary based on your child's interest and developmental level as well. So your main piece of focus and main advice here would be to think of toys that you think your child could learn to enjoy if they just knew how to play with them. So maybe they're watching the play of others because they don't really know how to manipulate that toy, but that would be the perfect opportunity for you to bring that toy to them and start to build on some of that imitation within play. So we're going to watch an example of onlooker play here. Okay, so you can see in this video that there are other children present and near this little boy, but he's just watching them play instead of actually interacting with them. So based on this short video clip, it's hard to tell what his specific interest is in the activity, but since he is motivated by the other children in their play, it is a good indication that he would be interested in something that you were modeling, as long as you made it fun and engaging for him. So again, you can proactively set up your environment to avoid the child bouncing around from thing to thing, if that's something that you're worried that your child will do. And I would say just to attend to the behavior of your child and make adjustments as you're in that interaction. So much like the first video, you're going to want to pair with your child before jumping right in. In this video, you could observe a little more and see what you think the boy is really interested in. And then you could start modeling those behaviors, trying to get him to imitate you, trying to find other, if he's interested in dumping the items out, you could try to find other toys that could serve that same function, and you guys could do some turn taking with that. You could start to build in some different sounds with the dropping of the balls, like zoom, or just different silly things like that. Just get creative, really, and think about all the teaching opportunities that you can provide by just playing and showing them different things to do. So the next stage of play is parallel play. And this means that your child is playing near other children and possibly even engaging with the same items, or really in close proximity with other peers. So some examples of this could be two children building separate block towers side by side, two children doing art activities next to each other, or children playing with different items in a play kitchen near each other. If your child seems to get frustrated when you or anyone else plays with their same toys, then this would be a great place to start as you ease into their play interaction, because in parallel play, you're not necessarily playing with the same items. You have your separate items and you're playing closely together. So if your child does struggle with something like that, this would be a great way to build yourself into that activity, because you could both have your own separate items but be doing similar things. So you could start by sitting next to your child and playing with items that are identical to their items, or it could be something different that you're trying to get them interested in. But really, you're just trying to get them to explore what you're doing and expose them to some new and different items that you think they would enjoy. And we will watch an example of parallel play now. Okay, so as you can see here, the boy and the girl are both putting cars down this car ramp, but they're not working together to a common goal, or they're not really even interacting with each other. They're just doing the same thing. So they're simply playing with the same toys, which is why it would be labeled parallel play and not something else. So in this interaction, you could jump in by placing cars down the ramp as well. So just imitating what they're already enjoying doing. You could try to make the activity better by racing lots of cars down the ramp at the same time, or making the cars crash whenever they get to the bottom. They could race to a finish line, go through a car wash. You could do tons of different things with this activity. But that would all be part of your pairing experience before placing demands. So you're just kind of exploring what the toys can do, teaching them other ways that they can engage with it. And really, for this specific example, there are a lot of teaching opportunities you can build in here as well. A common one to start with is imitation. So you put the car down and say, copy me, and then they do it. Or you could give them the direction to put the car down the ramp. You could ask them what color their car is. You could have them imitate doing something else. But just try to think of demands that are going to be really natural within their play, and not necessarily demands that are unrelated to the items that they're playing with. So another play stage is associated play. And this means that your child is playing with and near other children, but they may not be coordinating their play or cooperating. So some examples of this might include children playing at a water table, and maybe they're sharing the same materials and occasionally talking to each other about what they're doing, but they're not necessarily working together. Or it could be children engaging in ball play activities outside during recess and talking about that periodically. So let's watch this example. Okay, so as we observe the beginning of this video, we can see that the three boys are playing with the same items. And at first, to me, it kind of looked cooperative, but as we took a closer look and watched them in the middle of this interaction, the boy that was in the middle started knocking over the blocks, and it was clear that the boy on the left did not want that to happen. He kept saying, "My house, my house." And so therefore, they're not working together to complete a similar goal. So this would be why this is considered associative play. But it looks like the teacher's already done a great job of sanitizing the environment and making sure that they're all continuing to play with the same items, which is another way how you can facilitate play with other peers or siblings, or just how you can get them interested in play with you. And if you were to jump in with these boys right now and pair with the activity based on your observation of this video, you may go in and help them build the house. Maybe you show them how to build something else. You could take turns stacking the blocks. You could facilitate some conversation about what they're building, or try to get them to imitate their peers and what they're doing. And then you also just want to make sure that you're providing that reinforcement. If the boy on the left really wants to build a house, but the boy in the middle really wants to knock it over, and you're trying to facilitate interactions for both of them or give them both reinforcement, then it'll be important to build in some of that for each of them, or try to just pay attention to what they're seeking out of that interaction. So maybe you help them build a house, maybe you help the other one build a house, and then they get the opportunity to knock it over. But you just want to make sure that you're providing that reinforcement throughout those activities as well. Okay, and lastly, we have cooperative play. If your child is engaging in cooperative play, that means they will be with two or more children or adults playing with a common goal and common materials. And some examples of that could be children building a city with blocks, and each person is a different member of the city, or a group of kids dressed as firefighters, all working together to put out a fire. Again, your child is motivated to engage in cooperative play. If they are engaged to engage in cooperative play, then it should be easier for you to jump in and start to pair within that activity, because they're naturally already wanting to engage with others. But some great things to teach during cooperative play could be sharing. If that's problematic for your child, you could teach them how to play specific roles within a play interaction, such as one child does the stirring in the play kitchen and one person puts the food in the oven, or one person sets the table. You could also facilitate communication between the children, so getting them to advocate for their needs within play. You could work a lot on pretend play skills, or following a peer's lead. Let's say your child likes to make the decisions within play. So maybe if you're working on cooperative play, you can work on your child selecting the activity that the peer has selected, or following through with that activity instead of doing their selected activity. So there's lots of different things that you can work on within cooperative play, but you really want to capitalize on that motivation to play with others, because you're going to be able to give them a lot of different teaching opportunities. So let's watch this example. So I love this cooperative activity because every child has their own specific role within the activity. The girl on the left is holding the tube under the funnel. The boy in the middle is pouring the water into the funnel, and then the boy on the right is holding the other side of the tube and actually emptying the water that they're pouring into another container. So this was clearly an activity set up by a teacher or a parent to facilitate some cooperative play. This activity would not be possible without each of them participating in these roles. So this person did a great job of coming up with something that they could all cooperate in. To pair yourself into this activity, you could talk to them about what they're doing, get them really excited about the experiment, start to, talk to them about the other roles of their peers, or talk to them about what color the water is, or just in general things that they are doing within the activity. You could facilitate some turn taking or some different conversations within with their peers. And really, since the goal is to get the peers to cooperate together without your interaction whenever they're cooperating, because you do want to try to fade back as much as you can whenever they get to this stage of play so that they can really cooperate on their own without your interaction. But it would be great to start coaching the other peers or the other siblings in how to provide reinforcement for your child, or how they can start doing some of that so that you can fade back and ease out of that interaction. So now that we've talked about all of the different stages of play, let's talk about some of the problems that could arise for you whenever you're trying to engage yourself within play. So first, let's talk about what issues could arise within your observation. So maybe you misassess the items that your child is enjoying, or maybe you misassess the reinforcing value of an activity. So even though they're playing with it right now, when you start engaging with it, they seem less interested. That means the item probably isn't as reinforcing as you thought it was. And so you may just need to select something else that they're more interested in. But if you start to move on to pairing or teaching and realize your child becomes motivated for something else, or just isn't staying motivated for the activity that you've selected, then it's okay to shift gears and move on to something new. You don't necessarily have to keep the same play items or force that interaction to happen. Just really try to follow your child's lead and make sure that you can make that interaction as successful and positive as possible. So observation should continue throughout the whole interaction, and you can make any adjustments you need to keep the interaction positive. So it could also be that you selected items that your child doesn't really know how to manipulate, or maybe they have some finer gross motor limitations, and maybe something that you've asked them to do, or just the toy in general is hard for them to manipulate independently. So if you notice that that's the case, you don't want to hold them back by giving them materials that they don't necessarily know how or can manipulate. So maybe you just need to select some different materials that they can be more successful with on their own. You want your child to continue playing with you as long as they can. So the more that they're interested in playing with you means the more that you're going to have opportunities to teach them and get them interacting with you. So that's the reason why keeping it positive is so important, because if they're disinterested and they're trying to move away from you and all of that stuff, then you're not really going to have those opportunities to teach them. So another thing that might need modification is the environment. So we talked about what you can do proactively to set up the environment, like taking different toys away, decluttering the environment, and things like that. But if you are in the play interaction and realize that your child is trying to rotate between different things or bouncing around from activity to activity, they could just be distracted by something else. Any of those things that you notice, just make sure that you're making those modifications within the play interaction, so that you can then make your play interaction more successful. So maybe that means placing all other items on a shelf out of reach, or maybe placing them in the hallway out of sight. You could also take your play items to a less distracting environment if they're distracted by something in the environment that can't be taken away or changed. But basically, the goal is to just set your environment up for success throughout the whole interaction. So keep in mind those things as you're playing with your child and just make those modifications as you need to. And another obstacle that you could face when engaging in play interactions with your child is with pairing, teaching, or reinforcing. So if your child is showing signs of avoiding the interaction, maybe they're pushing you away or they're trying to run out of the room, maybe they start engaging in challenging behaviors or trying to avoid you, then it's really important that you listen to your child. They're trying to communicate something to you. So try to figure out what it is about the play interaction that they're not enjoying and just try to scale back and make a modification there. You can assess what about the interaction is not preferred to them. So it could be that sharing materials is really tricky for them. So maybe you just need to bring in your own materials or separate like a pile of materials for them and a pile of materials for you. It could be your proximity. Maybe they don't like anybody too close to their play items. So maybe you need to take a step back. The demands you're placing could be too challenging or too frequent. So pay attention to that. If you're starting to get a lot of pushback, think about how many demands you've placed on them or how often you're providing reinforcement. Those could be different things that are affecting your play interaction. And it could also be that you haven't paired yourself enough with the activity or you're not providing frequent enough reinforcement. So just really think about how your interaction with them is affecting their behavior and just try to make shifts in that and see if it's pairing, scale back to pairing. If that works, great. And then just ease into demands maybe less frequently than you were before. Or if you notice that they're not sharing materials well and you get new materials, that's awesome. Hopefully that works for them. And then you can start to build yourself back into their materials as well. So just try to keep it positive, and your child will want to continue to learn with you if you're keeping it positive for them. So that's really the main takeaway here and the main thing to continue to focus on throughout your interactions. So just to reiterate all the things that we continue to talk about, your role in the play interactions with your child have such a significant impact on your child's ability to learn new ways to play. It may take more analysis on your part than you're used to, but if you can remember these 5 steps, observe, set up the environment, pair, teach, and reinforce, then you'll be able to make your interactions better and more meaningful for your child. So some frequently asked questions for webinars are, will this be recorded? And the answer is yes, it's recorded and you'll be sent a link within a few days to where this webinar is, but we also have a Bierman YouTube channel that you can search for. And this webinar, along with any other webinars that we've created, can be found there. So if you missed a topic that you were interested in attending, you can find that there too. And then I talked briefly about the future webinar coming up on Play, but all of our webinars are at 8 p.m. The first one of the month is always an intro to either ABA, OT, or speech, sometimes a combination of those. So you'll see here our webinar in July is an introduction to ABA and speech. And then our second one is encouraging peer and sibling play interactions for your child. The ones in August are an intro to ABA and OT. And then our other one that I mentioned earlier is cultivating pretend play exploration and talking about all of that with pretend play. So you can follow the link below and you will be able to sign up for any of those trainings that you're interested in. And before I open the floor up to questions, I just want to remind everyone about who you can contact if you're a family that's on our wait list. If you're participating in our interim care services, the BCBA that's assigned to you through that program is a great resource for you. But if you're not in our interim care services, you can contact that center's clinical director. For current clients, you can direct any of your child-specific questions to their BCBA. And if you're just a prospective client, you can reach out to our email, info@biermanaba.com at any time, and somebody will reach out to you. So thank you so much for your attendance and your participation throughout this webinar. I'm going to stick around to answer any questions that you might have. But if you don't have any questions, then this is the end of our presentation and you're free to log off. But thank you so much for coming and for being a part of this. All right, so we do have one question. It says, we had friends over this weekend. It was really hard for him to share his toys with a younger child. What do I do in the future to help him out? So yeah, the webinar that we have on sibling and peer play that's coming up next month would be a really great one for you to attend for this. We're going to really dive into how to facilitate those peer and sibling interactions. But something you could do is you could try to be a part of that interaction as well. So you could try to facilitate that sharing with that younger child, or you may just notice that your child's just not quite there yet with their play skill development. So you may just have to try to redirect your child or the other peer to another activity. And then once your child loses motivation, trade those items. Or do something like that. It can be difficult to answer really individualized questions because I'm not really sure of the whole context of the scenario, but I would say either trying to be involved in that interaction and facilitate that interaction, or I would say just attend the webinar next month to get some more strategies on that. All right, so there's another question too. So my son doesn't want to play with anyone. He just wants to take the toys away from them and then throw the toy. So he really has no interest in the toy rather than taking it from someone. So that is really tricky. I would say trying to figure out what about that interaction is reinforcing to him. So if he really likes to take something, maybe you have different peers or siblings come up and give him things and then reinforce, like give him praise for taking that item when it's appropriate. I would say as much as you can find an appropriate replacement for that. So maybe he takes it, but you give him the direction to give it back and he does it, making a really huge deal out of that might be effective. It's hard to say because I'm not really sure what is motivating him to do that. I'm not sure if he's getting a reaction from the other kids when he takes the item, or if he's getting a reaction maybe from a parent or a teacher, but it could be an attention component. So if you can build in some ways to appropriately give him that attention, like I said, by giving him praise when he does give the item back, or maybe teaching him when it's appropriate to take something from someone, those could be potentially effective. You're so welcome. Yeah, play skills can be really tricky, especially when they're with other kiddos, because you can't always plan for what other kiddos are going to do. So I do hope that any of you who are interested in that specific play webinar will join us next month to really dive into that. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, I'm going to hop off of here, but thank you again for your participation, and I hope to see you at some of our future webinars.